The grim existence of a demon prince like me defies your wildest assumptions. I recall the burden of inevitable death, that straightforward promise of an end. How naive I was to dread it. I exchanged my mortal essence for divine status, escaping the clutches of oblivion. Yet now, my body scorches and rebuilds itself at each dawn. My thoughts spiral from illusory magnificence to oppressive bondage. The triumphs I claim aren't truly mine. My desires yield to forces I once imagined I could master. One instant, I direct legions spanning fiery constellations. The next, I convulse in bonds of eternal blaze. They label me undying. But is existence possible when you're owned by another? They dub me a prince, yet what sovereign endures a diadem that brings nothing but torment? In pursuing might, I forfeited something infinitely more valuable, something you still hold dear. Would you strike the deal I did, knowing eternity's actual cost? Long ago, I battled as a soldier in the Word-Bearer's Legion. My former identity matters little, erased as completely as my human nature. I toiled through the Great Crusade, loyally subjugating planets to align with an emperor I trusted would elevate humanity to stellar dominance. When Logar shifted his loyalty from the deceitful emperor to the authentic entities governing the universe, I joined him, not from mere submission, but deep belief. The Chaos Gods revealed honesty in a realm founded on tyrannical deceptions. They vowed strength to anyone bold enough to claim it, and boldness defined me above all. Over 200 years, I waged the endless conflict. I guided assault teams into material realms, piloted vessels that scorched farming planets to cinders, and dedicated the agonies of countless masses to the shadow deities. With every outrage, their attention fixed on me more sharply, their murmurs sharpened in my visions, vows of splendor, elevation, release from bodily frailties. I heeded them, I trusted. What we termed the anointing unfolded on a planet whose title has faded into obscurity, a minor imperial outpost at Ultramar's edge. Its sole significance lay in symbolism, territory held by Galaemon's heirs. We crashed down like a tempest, not for victory, but for profanation, reshaping it into a ceremonial ground to summon divine scrutiny. Over 7 days and nights, my troops and I performed the vast ceremony. We erected 8 towers of skinned remains encircling the governor's stronghold, each positioned to funnel warp forces. The inhabitants weren't merely executed, they were exploited. Every demise was meticulously staged, every cry a deliberate tone in an orchestra of torment reverberating into the warp. Crimson flowed in precise designs across the avenues, crafting symbols discernible solely from space. The world transformed into a sacrificial platform. On the concluding evening, as the barrier separating reality from the warp thinned to near transparency, I positioned myself at the ritual's heart. My plate bore heretical inscriptions that seared my skin despite the ceramite. I cast aside my helm, my features lifted to behold the churning tempest skies assembling overhead. Bolts of electricity hit the towers in flawless rhythm, ripping the barrier asunder. Emerging wasn't a deity, but an emissary, a supreme demon of Tanansh, the Lord of Change. Its shape fluxed endlessly, shimmering plumes dissolving into hide, then glassy forms cycling anew. Its numerous gazes assessed me with what I erroneously saw as admiration. Its words resounded as myriad murmurs within my psyche. The changer of ways has chosen you, frail one. Your drive delights him. Your guile entertains him. Your promise captivates him. Do you consent to discard your final human remnants and pledge unending fealty to his host of the altered? I affirmed instantly, oblivious to the full implications, yielding it all. The entity's mirth was the final noise my human senses captured. Its claws rent my torso, not to end me, but to remake me. My frame ignited an azure inferno, devouring tissue yet sparing awareness. I endured each instant of my dissolution, every fiber ripped asunder and reforged to suit a deity's inscrutable designs. My cranium stretched, my vertebrae warped and duplicated, my extremities extended and recast. Additional limbs erupted from my core, my hide toughened into segments here, turned sheer there, exposing innards that defied their prior roles. The agony defied words, transcended reason, not solely from its ferocity, intense as it was, but from its unnaturalness. It twisted in paths pain ought not traverse. It carried flavors, hues, echoes. It dwelled in realms beyond mortal comprehension. Abruptly, it ceased. I rose loftier, mightier, reborn. Energy surged through my lingering conduits. The fabric of existence felt pliable nearby. I perceived the warp's flows, the strands of destiny and chance. I detected the minds of my devotees as they bowed in worship. I chuckled, and the echo fractured the frozen droplets shed by those who had been sobbing. When the rite commenced, for that single, flawless instant, I was convinced of my triumph, that I'd surpassed the frailty of flesh and ascended to godlike stature. That liberation was mine at last. How mistaken I was. Utterly, catastrophically mistaken. The initial sign emerged shortly after, as the entity that had reshaped me fixed its multifaceted gaze upon me. I attempted to voice my gratitude to my benefactor for this boon, yet my lips refused to shape the phrases I meant to utter. In their place, I listened to myself vow unending loyalty in bonds far tighter than any promise I'd sworn in my human days. It wasn't coercion twisting my tongue. Rather, the urge to declare such fealty had been threaded into the core of my altered essence. My autonomy remained intact, yet it had been reforged entirely. The demon inclined its head in approval and motioned toward a vortex of energy at its back. Quote. It intoned. Quote. I crossed the threshold unquestioningly, not driven by force, but because the notion of refusal lay beyond my imagination, and so commenced my life as Zetharian, demon prince of Tzeentch, forever tethered to the deity of flux. What ensued was an era I can liken only to delirious euphoria. The might was genuine, as was the semblance of endless vitality. I guided hordes across the eye of terror, directing swarms of fiends and tainted souls. I unraveled the weave of existence nearby, molding it to suit my caprices. I felled heroes of the Imperium, twisting their remains into warped tributes to transformation. Amid every conquest, I fancied myself driven by personal ambition, chasing my cravings for dominion and retribution against the usurper on the throne. It required years upon years before the subtle rhythm surfaced, the faint prods in my mind, the eerie harmony between my urges and the unfathomable designs of Tzeentch. By that point, escape was impossible. The barbs had sunk too profoundly. I was a marionette gifted a mirage of independence, permitted to glimpse my tethers, yet powerless to sever them. Then arrived the initial reconfiguration. I'd stumbled in an assault on a resilient imperial planet, not a grave blunder in the cosmic tapestry, just a trivial hindrance in an unending conflict. Yet, it irked my sponsor. I was contemplating in my quarters on the command vessel when the torment reignited. Not the searing rebirth of my first elevation, but a calculated, intimate torment. My body started to warp and evolve against my wishes. Extra appendages erupted from my chest only to retract. My hide flickered between surfaces and hues. My viscera twisted into patterns lethal to any baseline human. For an eternity, or perhaps mere moments in the material realm, I was dismantled and reassembled to fulfill Tzeentch's fleeting fancies. When the ordeal ceased, I scarcely resembled my prior self. Gazing into the gleaming plate of my plate, I confronted an alien visage, a nightmarish blend of avian and saurian traits, beset by excessive orbs and adorned with a diadem of jagged crystals. The intent was unmistakable. Ownership of my shape eluded me. It was but a temporary endowment, open to alteration or withdrawal whenever the mood struck. My being endured solely by the deity's whim, and that whim proved fickle beyond measure. Such has defined my reality ever since. Phases of nominal self-rule, interrupted by savage affirmations of my actual place. I've undergone remodelings beyond numbering. Every shift imparts a dose of subjugation. Each fresh guise serves as a slate for Tzeentch to manifest his perpetual variability. Some epics see me directing fleets that blot out constellations, inspiring dread in the living and the undying as I draw near. Other times, I function as a mere courier, ferrying cryptic missives among superior fiends whose intrigues eclipse my scope. Predictability evades my rank. No steady cadence governs my fortunes. Tzeentch exalts or reduces me in service to designs forever opaque to me, and perpetually, inescapably, lingers the certainty that authentic liberty remains eternally unattainable. I bartered one overlord for a successor, vaster in exaction, deeper in intrusion, swifter in his whimsical brutality. This revelation evades every seeker of demonhood until the snare snaps shut. Elevation yields not emancipation. It crafts shackles impervious to fracture. It imposes a yoke irreversible in its clasp. We, former human luminaries who deemed ourselves fit for divinity, now amount to mere projections of our patron's intent. Our triumphs count as theirs. Our agonies amuse them. Our undying span serves neither boon nor bane, but as an implement in the grand stratagem. I divulge this not seeking pity or insight. Such notions hold no sway in the domain that claims me now. I offer it as a caution destined to be dismissed, echoing every admonition ignored since creation's inception. The route to might, via turmoil, guides to but a single end. No matter which dark deity you bind your soul to, the end result is the same. Bondage far more total than any human thrall could endure. Keep this truth in mind above all else. Among the shadowed powers, not even the most exalted lords are anything but pieces on the board. Allow me to recount my initial foray as a demon prince. The planet, known as Sarek V, served as a forge world of middling significance within the Imperium. It mainly produced rounds for bolter rifles, nothing glamorous yet essential for sustaining the firepower of the Astra Militarum across over 100 conflict fronts. Hardly a glamorous objective, yet its absence would sting deeply in numerous sectors. My assault transcended simple conquest. It formed a ceremony unto itself. Every deployment of my troops mirrored a particular alignment in the ever-mutating skies of the warp. Every outpost I permitted the Imperials to hold stood as a point in an immense incantation, destined to reshape the globe entirely. This insight came to me intuitively, embedded in my essence amid my elevation. The Empire's guardians battled with the fierce resolve of those aware of their impending end. Astra Militarum units advanced in rigid unison toward oblivion. Engine seers repurposed factory equipment into makeshift armaments. Even the ordinary laborers grasped tools, brandishing plasma cutters and heavy mallets against my infernal hordes. Their defiance achieved nothing, yet I respected their unyielding spirit. It evoked echoes of my former existence, the fragile humanity I had forsaken. On the siege's 49th day, I strode into the core forge facility in person. The sweltering temperatures could warp ceramite plating, but my altered physique reveled in it. The atmosphere hung heavy with aromas of liquid steel, promethium fumes, and terror. Servitors pressed on with their production duties amid the surrounding carnage, their rudimentary directives blind to the turmoil overtaking their domain. Deep within the facility, I confronted the Archmagos. By the Mechanicus's own chronology, he was venerable, more cybernetic construct than organic being, retaining just one human optic and tatters of desiccated tissue to hint at his origins. He positioned himself before a colossal reactor pillar, his mechadendrites linked straight to its mechanisms. "I comprehend your scheme," he declared, his tone a grinding metallic wheeze. "Your efforts will fail, monstrosity." My laughter rang out, forcing the subordinate engine seers nearby to grip their enhanced hearing implants in agony. "You grasp nothing, minion of the impostor Omnissiah. Your perception remains shackled to material reality. I perceive past those limits." "Maybe so," the Archmagos countered, "but I possess sufficient insight to thwart your ambition." As I moved to respond, he initiated the reactor's meltdown protocol. The room surged with lethal energies that would slay any baseline human in moments. His attendant tech adepts crumpled, their skin peeling from skeletons while their implants fizzled and died. Yet the elder Magos endured upright, shielded by some arcane device beyond my recognition. The onslaught coursed through my demonic shell without wounding me, though it shattered the intricate ceremony I had orchestrated planet-wide. The cosmic pattern shaped by my legion's advances now lay askew. The enchantment frayed at the edges, Fury surged within me, fiercer than any I'd felt in life. I surged ahead, claws stretching to unnatural spans, and rent the Archmagos apart, joint by mechanical joint. His final wail pierced the noosphere in a cascade of machine code resounding across the Forge world. I flung his remains throughout the space, dooming any chance for the cult Mechanicus to reclaim his data or recollections. But the damage was irreversible. The right lay in tatters. In that instant, my patron's ire washed over me like an icy gale through my core. Upon my return to the command vessel in high orbit, a lord of change awaited in my sanctum, not the same being from my apotheosis, but another of Tzeentch's exalted fiends. It fixed me with gazes mirroring the genesis and extinction of celestial bodies. Quote 7. It intoned, its timbre like the rustle of tomes in lost archives. Quote 8, quote 9, I argued. Quote 10, unquote 11. The daemon repeated, twisting the term into derision with its utterance. Quote 12. Then it began, the writhing in my form, the onset of yet another metamorphosis. Unlike the prior ones, this carried intent deeper than retribution or whimsy. My frame started to solidify into crystalline facets. Crystals formed, starting from my limbs and spreading toward my center. My mind stayed intact, yet my power to act, shift, or utter words was methodically taken from me. Quote 13. The Lord of Change declared. Quote 14. Thus I lingered there, a breathing effigy on my own ship, observing as authority passed to one of my officers. Vision, hearing, and thought persisted for me, but not even a twitch of a digit. My capital ship turned into my cage, my display hall, and my chamber of agony combined. Over 67 years, I endured this half-life limbo. I saw my raiding force press on with the endless conflict in my absence. I noted treacheries and rivalries among my old underlings. I watched Imperial assault teams invade my ship on 3 distinct occasions, each repelled short of my quarters. Throughout, I stayed immobilized, aware, inwardly howling without sound. That ordeal reshaped me deeper than any bodily alteration might. I grasped the full extent of my bondage, the utter dominance of Tien's grip on my being, the empty farce of my so-called rise to demon status. No elevation had occurred, enslavement had. When the hardening at last unraveled, allowing motion, voice, and orders anew, I emerged unlike the being once locked in place. The fury and bitterness had hardened too, forging into something icy, unyielding, and enduring. I realized then that flawless submission marked my sole way ahead, not the reluctant yielding of a vanquished enemy, but the complete merging of my desires with my master's. By turning into an ideal tool for Tien's schemes, alone could I evade such torment henceforth. With fresh resolve, I rejoined the protracted crusade. I guided my warband through operations of such intricate design that even my sharpest deputies couldn't unravel their end aims. We'd seize a planet just to forsake it, slay an imperial overseer only to install a stooge who upheld identical decrees, plunder relics of vast might only to scatter them in odd spots throughout the stars. Meanwhile, Tzeentch's favor washed over me like a far-off sun's glow. Inconstant, unpredictable, yet frequent enough to confirm I advanced his unknowable aims. The transformations persisted, though rarer, milder, more deliberate. My shape adapted to each mission's demands, at times minor, others sweeping. I evolved into a form changer whose essence dissolved into the parts I had to enact. One operation on a shrine planet stands out, where I needed to pose as an imperial holy figure. My demonic essence hid under a facade of such flawlessness that even battle sisters bowed in awe. I mingled with the devout, bestowing graces via contacts that mimicked sanctity, but sowed decay in their spirits. For 3 years, I upheld the ruse, gradually tainting a whole world's piety until the shroud fell and the terror unveiled. The warp backlash from that treachery ripped a rift in existence, engulfing the planet's full basilica zone and hurling thousands of spirits shrieking into the warp's voracious depths. Tzeentch approved. My prize, a stretch of comparative steadiness. For almost a century, I held one guise, one self. I forged a domain in the eye of terror. I gathered lore, relics, and sway. I started fostering private aspirations again. Naturally, it formed yet another trial, another insight into my chains. I'd set up a bastion on a demon world buried in the eye, a warped maze of a citadel where halls reshuffled at my caprice, walls etched with arcane rites that shattered fragile psyches, foundations built atop the petrified husk of a crashed Eldar craft world. From there, I orchestrated strikes over a dozen imperial zones. Inquisitors murmured my title in dread, my emblem spelled ruin, known to everyday imperial folk. I'd reached a rank scarce among demon princes. Then, abruptly and inexplicably, it dissolved. I roused one morning to discover my stronghold erased, swapped for an endless expanse of azure crystal reaching to every skyline. My demon hordes, human devotees, brother Chaos Space Marines, all erased as though mere illusions. I stood solitary, bare and bewildered, my body pared back to near-human frailty. One shape neared over the flatland, a human male in plain garb. He was utterly ordinary in appearance, save for his eyes, which churned with the myriad hues of transformation. A seer of Sen, among the scarce mortal psychers capable of conversing with the deity of flux without descending fully into madness. The weaver of destinies envisions a fresh blueprint for you, Prince Cytherian, he declared, his tone laced with fatigue and wry humor. Your era as a conqueror draws to a close. Your phase as a rover commences. I fail to grasp it, I responded. And honestly, that was the case. I had devoted myself loyally. I had advanced Sench's inscrutable agendas. I had absorbed the doctrine of utter submission. In what way had I offended our Lord? The seer grinned. And in that grin, I glimpsed the core essence of disorder that every devotee of chaos ultimately uncovers. Offended? You misconstrue it. This isn't retribution. This is intent. You've grown overly rigid, too entrenched in your position. A demon prince who clings to routines stands in opposition to the sovereign of mutation. It's not your deeds that prompted this shift, but your triumph within them. With those words, the seer motioned, parting the atmosphere to reveal a gateway at his side. Beyond it lay an unfamiliar realm, a war zone where imperial troops battled beasts akin to tyrannids, yet they maneuvered with eerie precision, hinting at warped taint. Your fresh calling lies ahead, the seer intoned. Venture out as a rover, without lord or chains. Let chaos embody unpredictability in its purest form. Evolve, shatter routines instead of forging them. Once you've mastered this truth, you might receive a novel essence of might. Or maybe not. Doubt is the sole reliable element in devotion to Tinch. I possessed no alternatives. I crossed the threshold into my transformed life as a drifter, an erratic factor amid fate's vast calculations. For ages, I roamed in this manner, thrusting myself into skirmishes throughout the stars, consistently aiming to unsettle rather than dominate. I evolved into a spark of alteration, not a tool for any fixed scheme. I shed my title, my past, and even the steady bodily shape that once defined me as Cytherian. In this capacity, I unearthed a distinct form of dominion, not the blatant command of a tyrant, but the sly sway of the unforeseen outlier. I would materialize on fields of combat where victory appeared inevitable and redirect destiny's path through one strategic act. I would descend upon imperial planets, teetering toward revolt, stifling the revolt or fanning its flames, based on whichever choice would unsettle entrenched norms the most. I would murmur verities and fabrications alike to the influential, planting seeds of suspicion, craving, and fear. Amid it all, I sensed Tiana's gaze as a burden, at times burdensome, at times fleeting, yet perpetually there. I was enacting a part in a drama whose lines eluded me, whose conclusion defied foresight, but by that stage I comprehended that this was the very essence. Sench himself remains ignorant of how his intrigues will develop. He ignites occurrences and revels in their surprising twists. My bewilderment, my doubt, my endless adjustments to shifting realities all served as tributes to his intrinsic being. Nevertheless, even within this deliberate turmoil, I caught myself forming habits. It is inherent to conscious intellects, demonic or otherwise, to pursue order and purpose. I started foreseeing which war zones would capture my patron's focus. I honed methods of interference that I reused in comparable scenarios. I fashioned a fresh persona for myself, a roving demon prince dubbed the Shifter, whose emergence signaled abrupt evolution. In its essence, this represented yet another shortfall in comprehending the depth of my servitude. The epiphany struck amid what humans term the obscurest crusade. I had been pulled to a specific sector where the Imperium was securing notable victories over a pact of chaos warbands. My goal was to halt the Imperial momentum by slaying a vital commander and substituting a mimic who would steer his troops into a trap. It was a strategy I had carried out victoriously on 3 prior instances, adapted slightly for varying conditions. A routine, essentially, yet one that had stayed potent and baffling to adversaries. I had slipped into the Imperial hierarchy, adopting the guise of a lowly aide. I stood mere clearance from my mark when the accustomed ominous stirrings of reshaping overtook me. My meticulously shaped mortal facade dissolved, exposing my infernal essence right in an Imperial headquarters. Scores of aides and stormtroopers pivoted my way, their faces morphing from bewilderment to dread. Lasguns lifted, commands rang out, and I, who had orchestrated this venture so meticulously, stood unmasked by my own overlord's caprice. The chaos that followed was hardly what I had. Instead of a precise strike against one specific foe, I found myself compelled to rip apart the whole hierarchy in a whirlwind of claws and dark magic. When I finally broke free, half the Imperial High Command on that sector had fallen, their lifeblood splashed across the bunker walls and overhead in intricate designs that would eventually be identified as an obscure emblem of Tench. As I vanished into the warp, my shape twisting without control, it hit me that I had grown foreseeable amid my supposed randomness. I had honed methods, favored tactics, and routines for unleashing disorder, and the Tutsinch represented the gravest sin. True defiance demands novelty. True disorder must embody utter disorder. The deity of flux had unveiled this by twisting my meticulous scheme into savage carnage. Not out of fear that my strategy might collapse, but precisely because it was poised to triumph just as I had envisioned. And when purpose turns routine, it becomes abhorrent to him. This stands as the slyest trap of devotion to the Shifter of paths. Even in moments when you feel you're satisfying his whims without flaw, that very flawlessness might displease him. The sole unchanging truth is flux itself. The only dependable cycle is shattering cycles. For thousands of years, I have lingered in this endless flux. I have led as a warlord and roamed as a nomad, strategized as a commander and infiltrated as an operative, dominated as an invader and undermined as a wrecker. I have directed forces that darkened the heavens over countless planets, and I have trudged solo amid the ruins of realms I aided in ruining. I've assumed guises that struck dread into the hearts of elite space marine leaders, and I have taken on shapes so reduced that ordinary soldiers mocked my arrival, blind to the doom facing them until it struck. Amid every twist, I have obeyed, not by choice, nor against it, but as an inescapable fate. My desires and senses have woven so tightly that I can't tell where mine fades into his. This, maybe, marks the deepest conquest by the dark powers over chaos's devotees, not through outright chains, but by reshaping us so bondage blurs into liberty. Yet there come instants, scarce and invaluable, when I catch sight of my current self, when echoes of my former life surface. Such flashes of insight bring the sharpest agony. I believe, too, that Tiench bestows them on purpose, a refined agony surpassing any bodily torment. The awareness of what I've forfeited, paired with the unshakable knowledge that I'd choose it anew if given the chance, forms a riddle fit for the god of flux. Now I turn to the deepest shift I've undergone since rising as a daemon prince. Not some bodily overhaul, though those abound, but a soul-deep reckoning. A revelation that laid bare the full dread of my chains, while oddly offering the nearest taste of liberty I've felt since my rise. It unfolded amid what Imperial archives term the Third War for Armageddon. I played no direct role there, dispatched by my master to a lesser skirmish in the Ultima Segmentum. My mission centered on taming a certain Ultramarines librarian, a formidable psyker whose foresight had thwarted multiple Chaos offensives. Tien craved this space marine not slain, but converted, his abilities and seer talents bent to aid the god of flux. Over 30 years, I pursued this librarian through more than 10 planets, haunting his sleep with visions, murmuring doubts in his contemplative hours, sowing mistrust in the Emperor, his brethren, and the fabric of existence. It demanded finesse unlike any prior effort of mine. I never showed as a daemon, but as a chain of ordinary human figures, each seemingly unrelated. A guard colonel posing uneasy queries, a world ruler bearing proof of ultramarine overreach, a peer librarian from a rival order sharing warp speculations that danced near blasphemy without leaping in. Gradually, relentlessly, I steered him toward ruin. I observed his convictions crumble, his inquiries sharpen, his psychic wielding grow bolder and wilder. I sensed Sench's delight at every minor triumph, each stride the librarian made into perdition. This subversion was set to crown my achievements, proving my worth as a cunning harbinger of flux over simple devastation. The climax awaited on a holy site named Piety, dispatched there to probe odd occurrences near a saint's burial vault. Those oddities stemmed from my designs, of course, precisely tuned to lure him to that spot where the barrier between material realm and warp grew frailest, where his ultimate fall, it was possible to pull off. I lurked in the underground crypts under the sanctuary, my appearance cleverly masked as that of an old servitor, just one among the hordes keeping up the vast network of passages filled with the devout corpses of believers. I observed the librarian make his solitary descent, guided by his mental abilities straight to the focal spot I'd set up. His features showed unease, his steps uncertain. He sensed the weight of what lay ahead, even if its real meaning escaped him. As he stepped into the modest oratory where I lay in wait, his gaze locked on, acknowledging me not as a demon prince, but as the link tying together all the informants who'd been supplying him data for years. His bolt pistol appeared in his grip right away, yet he held back from shooting. Intrigue held his finger steady exactly as I had anticipated. "You've been shadowing me," he stated, his words reverberating through the tight, rocky room. "Steering me. For what reason?" I let my cover fade just a bit, exposing fragments of my actual essence so he could feel the immense force hidden inside the servitor's frail shell without provoking his fighting instincts fully. Quote 22. I explained. Quote 23. He offered no rebuttal. Yet another minor triumph. Quote 24. He inquired. Quote 25. I answered. Quote 26. The librarian advanced a pace, his empty palm reaching out like he yearned to grasp the revelation I dangled. Then he halted, his look turning steely. Quote 27. I grinned, or rather, the servitor's features twisted into the nearest thing to a smile they could muster. There's invariably a toll, yet it's one that countless space marines prior to you have considered worthwhile since Horus's era. Allegiance for awakening. For an extended instant he remained quiet, and I could witness the internal conflict storming in his stare. Years of brainwashing clashed with the doubts I'd meticulously sown. His arm, outstretched in my direction, quivered faintly. He teetered on the brink, evenly poised between ruin and salvation. A single phrase from me would push him into the abyss. The taint would seal itself. The success would belong to me. But right then, in that pivotal instant, I sensed the shift starting. Yet another reshaping. My intricate facade started dissolving, not slowly like I'd designed, but savagely, beyond control. The servitor's body peeled away like sodden tissue, unveiling my genuine demonic form in its horrifying magnificence. Azure fires burst from my sockets and jaws, my appendages stretched out, claws erupting from digits that had been cybernetic seconds earlier. Wings spread from my spine, demolishing the chapel's modest roof and raining debris all around. The librarian reeled back, raising his bolt pistol, his countenance flipping from allure to holy rage in a flash. "Demon!" he snarled, the term serving as both label and curse. I might have slain him at that point. He held strength, sure, but he was caught off guard and isolated, severed from his squad mates. Even with my scheme in tatters, I could have seized his demise as some sort of fallback gain. Yet as I towered above him, my shape still evolving, still molding to whatever fresh design Kian had chosen for this juncture, a truth hit me like a thunderhammer's blow. This wasn't retribution. This wasn't a random wrecking of my precise strategy. This was the strategy. It had forever been the strategy. The librarian was never the real Mark. I was. My subversion of him served as a lure, a diversion, a ploy layered within a ploy. Tien had directed my assignment, aware it would draw me to this precise location, this exact instant, not to sway a space marine, but to undergo this epiphany, to grasp the extent of my lord's sway, to see that even in moments of supposed independence, I remained merely a token shifted on the field by a mind so immense it foresaw the game's close before any figure stirred. The librarian discharged his bolt pistol. The explosive round burst on my torso, ripping open a gash in my skin that healed in no time. He retreated to the passage opening, continuing to shoot, every blast as futile as the initial one. I didn't budge to chase. I merely remained amidst the wreckage of the ruined oratory. My metamorphosis finished, my comprehension reshaped alongside my physique. I permitted his flight, not from pity or apathy, but because I at last comprehended that his getaway was every bit as integral to Tench's design as every prior event. He would head back to his chapter bearing stories of a demon plot stretching across decades. Probes would commence. Fellow Space Marines would face examination for traces of corruption. Suspicion. The taint I couldn't instill in that single Ultramarines librarian would ripple outward through their legions, undermining their prowess across numerous battlefronts. The corruption that eluded me in one instance would emerge through alternative channels, infiltrating innumerable pathways. Science's intricate blueprint, flawless in its elaboration, would play out precisely as intended. For 7 years following that event, I lingered on piety, not out of preference, but under strict orders. My body had been reshaped into a grotesque abomination, unmistakably infernal, rendering me unable to mingle with humans, even under cover. I was relegated to the underground vaults, the labyrinthine depths below the shrine planet, surfacing solely under cover of darkness to seize sporadic offerings from the devotees flocking to the saint's sepulchre. Those years marked a time of introspection, meditation, and reconciliation with the epiphany that had struck me amid the ruins of that desecrated sanctuary. I once viewed myself as a catalyst for upheaval, a shrewd orchestrator devoted to the deity of deceit with guile and finesse. In reality, I formed just another stratum in the web of illusions, deceived even while deceiving, tainted even as I tainted others. The ideal devotee of Tench isn't the one who flawlessly carries out his Lord's designs, but rather the one whose triumphs and setbacks both advance those designs, frequently in manners beyond the devotee's grasp until much later. This insight didn't liberate me. No force could. Yet it bestowed a certain serenity and acceptance of my purpose that, ironically, enabled me to embody it with greater efficacy. I ceased resisting the whimsical essence of my being. I welcomed the unpredictability, the endless flux, the awareness that my most elaborate plots were mere annotations in the immense, unfathomable tome of destiny that Cinch inscribed upon the stars. When at last I was recalled to duty, pulled from my buried seclusion by a gathering of wizards who scarcely endured the ceremony needed to tether me to their desires for a fleeting span, I resurfaced altered not only in flesh, but in essence. The wizards thought they had acquired a formidable ally. Truthfully, they had unleashed an entity far more perilous, a demon prince who had surpassed the petty drives and grudges that propel most of my brethren. I aided them indeed, but akin to how a tempest aids the fragile insect whose flutter ignites its fury. My onslaughts of dread and metamorphosis upon their foes' domains adhered to no tactics they could unravel. My successes proved as erratic as my losses. My shapes altered not merely daily, but hourly, at times even by the moment. I evolved into alteration personified, a manifestation of Tian's core essence rather than a mere follower. The wizards who invoked me began to dread me. They tried to exile me back to the immaterium. Their ceremony collapsed. not due to any defect, but because I had entwined myself so deeply into the weave of existence encircling their bastion planet that no distinct line separated my essence from the realm itself. I had morphed into a compact living hellscape, a pinpoint distortion in the principles of matter and chance. Gradually, the wizards underwent their own alterations, their forms and psyches reshaping to mirror their deepening bond to Tench via my conduit. Some resisted these shifts and descended into insanity. Others welcomed them, attaining novel tiers of might and rising as autonomous harbingers of flux. A handful sought escape, only to discover that separation from my corporeal shell did nothing to break the link I had forged. They bore my essence like a plague, disseminating it to every sphere they touched in their frantic exodus. Over 200 years, I dominated that bastion world, though dominate falls short of describing my creation there. It suggests order, framework, pecking order. What I forged stood in direct opposition, a realm of ceaseless insurrection where today's overlords turned into tomorrow's victims, where the rules of nature redrafted themselves, guided solely by the impulse of transformation, where chronology reversed as readily as it advanced, and outcomes preceded origins with equal frequency. It was magnificent. It was horrifying. It was the most unadulterated realization of Tian's decree that I had ever been honored to bring about. And when it concluded, as everything inevitably does in fealty to the Lord of Flux, it concluded with breathtaking drama. An armada of gray knights, a full chapter sworn to purging the infernal, materialized in the skies unannounced. Their assault bypassed any drawn-out positioning, any blockade or grinding conflict. It was exacting, meticulous, and irresistible. They materialized straight into the core of my territory, commanded by a supreme commander whose plate shimmered with aegises so potent that the fabric of existence steadied around him, unraveling my subtle perversions of duration and dimension. I confronted them in the pivotal hall of what was once the Citadel's primary bastion, even if it had evolved long ago into something far more resembling into a vast temple of living tissue, crystalline shards, and otherworldly geometries. At that instant, my shape was likely the most horrifying guise I'd ever assumed, an ever-morphing cluster of gazes, orifices, and appendages that twisted through dimensions in manners defying human perception, threatening to shatter any observer's sanity. The rank-and-file Grey Knights recoiled upon beholding it, their psychic cowls short-circuiting, crimson rivulets pouring from under their visors as their augmented intellects grappled futilely with the vision. Yet the Grandmaster remained resolute. Gripped in his fist was a blade that sliced the very fabric of the immaterium, disrupting the bonds linking Daemon to the material plane wherever its tip landed. He uttered a name, not my present moniker, but the one from my days as a human legionary of the Word-Bearers, epochs ago, some 10,000 years past. A designation I'd believed erased eternally, purged from annals, erased from my own recollection. Its resonance hit me like a tangible force. For an instant, a fleeting one, I recalled the essence of humanity, the limits of mortality, the singularity of selfhood, unbound from mere servitude to my deity's desires. In that vulnerable pause, the Grandmaster lunged. His weapon pierced the core that served as my essence, a gem-like nexus throbbing with chaotic energies amid my fluid silhouette. The torment was sublime, not for its ferocity, but for its primal clarity. Tangible, corporeal, graspable. Following millennia of perceptions that eluded definition, dwelling in realms beyond sensory grasp, the straightforward torment of metal-rending meat evoked a peculiar reminiscence. I sensed my exile commencing, ties to the physical realm unraveling, my meticulously woven sanctuary crumbling as forces yanked me into the roiling immaterium. The Grey Knights launched their rites of exorcism without delay, scouring the bastion chamber by chamber, tier by tier, with flames, devotion, and the untainted might of their aura. Even as I was hauled distant, my consciousness spanned the voids, observing my labors dismantled by the minions of the pretender, God King. Fury should have consumed me. I ought to have seethed against this reversal, this indignity inflicted by mere flesh-and-blood foes. But as I spun through the prismatic currents of the warp, journeying back to my Lord's territory. A peculiar fulfillment washed over me, like a loop closing as destined, transformation serving its inexorable role. Upon re-emerging in the vitreous maze of Tzinch, reshaping amid the paradoxical contours of my patron's dominion, I stood before the weaver of destinies in person. Not face to face, for no demon, not even his most exalted minions, endures the sight of Tzinch's authentic visage without dissolution. Still, his essence was palpable, an immense cognition saturating each atom of that space, coexisting across all temporal instants and divergent paths. When his communication arrived, it wasn't auditory, but an insight blooming whole in my thoughts, as though it had lingered eternally, merely awaiting my awareness. Do you comprehend? It conveyed more assertion than inquiry. I do, I responded, and sincerity rang true. I grasped that my downfall wove into his blueprint as seamlessly as my triumphs, that the gray nights had been drawn to my lair not in spite of my might, but precisely through it, their expulsion of me advancing some arcane objective within the god of Flux's boundless enigmas. Then you are prepared for your subsequent rebirth. The anguish reignited, the customary torment of metamorphosis. Yet now I yielded not in opposition. I harbored no dread. I welcomed it wholly, submitted without reserve. My structure melted into raw warp essence, then gradually reformed. But the result diverged from the abomination I'd embodied on that stronghold planet, or from the countless guises spanning my protracted lifespan. I inhabited a configuration eerily akin to my primordial human shell. A word-bearer. Astartes, imposing and robust, yet bearing unmistakable mortal traits in build and visage. Subtle traces of my infernal heritage lingered, a soft azure luminescence in my gaze, and a subtle suppleness in my motions, suggesting my outline hovered between solidity and illusion. You shall stride amid humanity anew. Tzinch's aura conveyed. You will serve as my senses in realms where bolder agents dare not venture. You will murmur where once you bellowed, you will sway where you once dictated, you will embody the quiet shift heralding the apocalypse. I inclined in deference, embracing this fresh mantle as I had every prior one, not in bitterness or defeat, but with insight. This marked no downgrade, but progression, no penalty, but prospect. In Tzinch's fold, ascent and descent hold no sway. Only flux endures, and one's efficacy in ushering it forth. Thus, I ventured back to the corporeal expanse, to the spheres of humankind. In this understated incarnation, I slipped into imperial domains, not as an invader, but as a fugitive, a remnant, a wanderer in quest of haven. I infiltrated sects, not as their overlord, but as an unassuming follower, steering their growth through sly hints instead of decrees. I undermined world overseers and armed commanders, not with flashy bursts of infernal might, but via reasoned debates, insidious tweaks, and rare showcases of my understated abilities. Across 1,000 years, I've trodden this route, the stealthiest among Tench's followers, the least noticeable of his operatives. I've brought down governments with a murmured phrase to the proper listener. I've diverted holy wars through forged psychic missives. I've tainted Space Marine legions, not by clashing head-on, but by gradually tainting their enlistment planets, guaranteeing that every fresh batch of recruits carries a touch more of Tiana's sway into their fold. It's a novel sort of authority compared to my former exertions, yet equally profound in its impact. The demon prince who leads legions might seize planets, but the one who murmurs confidences can taint entire regions. The overt terror may reap thousands of fatalities, but the hidden sway can consign millions of spirits to ruin. Throughout it all, I've kept this guise, this remnant of my human days, not from affection or longing, but because it aligns with Kian's designs for me to present thus, to evoke in those I subvert the potential fate awaiting them, to dangle the identical deceptive vow of transcendence that ensnared me into perdition eons past. For that's the essence of chaos, the core reality every devotee of the shadow deities must confront in time. No upliftment comes sans domination, no strength sans cost, no liberty in ruin. The deities' boons exist, yet they're debts, not presents, with repayment exacted in boundless bondage and anguish. I share this not to deter you from the route you've embraced. Such efforts are long past viable. I impart it so that upon your rise, when your body is reforged and your essence chained forever to your benefactor's desires, you won't squander ages in pointless defiance as I once did. From the outset, you'll grasp what I discerned only after endless ages of agony. Yielding is the sole respite our sort can claim. Submission stands as the only triumph for a demon prince. The gods demand their toll irrespective of your defiance. Your sole remaining option is to render it voluntarily or let it be wrenched from you, fragment by tormented fragment, across an endless tenure of obedience that concludes merely when your value wanes, your might fades, and your self is so utterly merged with your overlords that no trace lingers of your former being. I am Zarian, demon prince of Sinch, perpetual thrall to the weaver of destinies. I've donned countless shapes, directed forces that shrouded the heavens of innumerable realms, and breathed decay into the minds of champions whose legends endure in awe within humanity's dominion. I've tasted dominion transcending human grasp and bondage surpassing human fortitude. And I declare to you now, with the unshakable conviction of one who has embodied this reality for 10,000 years, that no flight exists from the pact you've struck. No liberty awaits beyond demonic existence. There lingers only devotion, unending and total, to overlords whose grand designs you'll never wholly fathom. This is the burden we endure, we lords of the Empyrean. Not a diadem of splendor, but one of perpetual torment. Not a symbol of ascent, but a seal of possession. Etch this into your memory across the vast epochs of your impending allegiance. Recall it and glean whatever solace you might from knowing your resistance holds as little weight as your capitulation. That your successes and defeats serve merely to advance the unfathomable plots of divinities who regard you as naught but a handy implement to be molded or cast aside at their caprice. This marks the sole insight I proffer, the only bequest I can bestow upon one treading the trail I traversed ages hence. Accept it for its meager merit, and may your fetters weigh gently on you, kin, through the boundless vassalage awaiting us alike.